it brings me to our next speaker. Michele, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. I'll read your bio before I hand over the stage. Michele has worked in the nonprofit arena for more than 20 years, serving on over a dozen boards in roles from treasurer to president. Her best-selling book, So You Want to Start a Nonprofit? Now What? She's interviewed over 60 experts, blending their insights with her own to guide new and small nonprofits. Michele has chaired key committees, founded 2 nonprofits, published a second nonprofit book, and now helps others to launch and grow. So thank you so much for your work, Michele. It's an absolute honor to have you with us. Please introduce yourself, tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Michele Whetzel. I am here in Newark, Delaware, in the United States. And it is evening here, not morning. So it's really great to be here. I asked a friend for an idea of what I should talk about tonight. And she said that she reminded me that I've become, for better or worse, a great advocate for my loved ones when they're in need of help when in the hospital or when, dealing with a serious illness. And I think many people come across this, and I want to help them from what I have learned through the process over the last 15 or 20 years. I'm going to give you 3 stories about people that my loved ones who I've helped. What would you do if somebody you loved were in crisis and you're the only one standing between the life-saving care that they needed, and you were the only one who could really help them? I have been a health advocate for 3 different family members when they faced serious health crises: my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, and most recently, my husband. Healthcare is complex, fragmented, and often overwhelming. To me, this is the most important part. The patients themselves are often too sick, too medicated, or too scared to advocate for themselves. But if you are the one who is ill, do not think that you can advocate for yourself. Many times you're too sick, scared, or medicated to do it. You need someone else in your corner. So these patients, families, or other loved ones can make a difference between whether they live or die, honestly. So the first story I'm going to tell you about, my father-in-law in 2008 needed a liver transplant. And by the time he moved up on the transplant list, the hospital in Pennsylvania told him that he was too sick and too old for them to do the transplant. They told us family members to take him home for hospice care and that there was nothing else they could do. But my husband, fortunately, asked one more question that changed the course of his father's life. He asked, is there another hospital where they might do a liver transplant? And it turned out that there was. They wouldn't have told us if he hadn't asked that question. Another hospital on the other end of the state of Pennsylvania was willing to save his life with a transplant because they do more transplants in a year. So if they were to lose an older, unhealthy patient, it wouldn't affect their statistics as much as it would the hospital that was unwilling to do it. So we learned through that. He ended up surviving another 5 years after that, and he would not have if we had just taken him home for hospice care like they had suggested. So So the lesson I learned there is always ask one more question. Options often exist, even when you're told that there are none. In 2013, my mother-in-law fell and broke her shoulder. She had surgery to repair it, but she didn't do well with the anesthesia. So she ended up being bedridden for months after that. In the nursing home where she was recovering, they started prescribing anti-anxiety medications for her. The doctors there only saw patients once a week, and so they weren't familiar with each individual case. And they didn't realize that as they kept prescribing more anti-anxiety medications because she was becoming more anxious, these meds were actually having the opposite effect on her. She ended up back in the hospital because these pills were making her so anxious. At one point, she said, "I just can't live like this," because it really was driving her out of her mind. And because she said that, the hospital put her on a 24-hour suicide watch. And this was a 70-something-year-old woman who was bedridden. So she couldn't do anything to take her life, but that's how crazy the whole thing became. So I convinced a young doctor at the hospital that it was actually an overdose of these particular anti-anxiety medications. And he agreed to slowly wean her off of them, because you can't just take someone off of these medications cold turkey, because it will cut holes in their brain. It will do brain damage. That's how serious these medications are. So now, 12 years later, she is 88 years old. She lives at home alone with some caregivers occasionally, but she is doing great. And I'm not sure what would have happened if that doctor hadn't seen what I was trying to explain. So lesson 2, trust your instincts. You know your loved one better than anyone else. And the doctors may have a great patient load. They may not have all the answers. And you need to advocate for what you think is the right course of action. So that leads me to the most recent story. About 14 months ago, my husband was diagnosed out of the blue with stage 4 cancer, meaning the cancer had already spread to his bones by the time they found it. He had had rib pain on one side, and he thought he had bruised or maybe a cracked rib. And after a few weeks after the diagnosis, they still hadn't determined what the origin of the cancer was so that they could treat it. He ended up in the hospital with a blood infection and was in a lot of pain. After he'd been in the hospital for 2 weeks, still undiagnosed, still not being treated for cancer, but unable to go home until they figured out how to manage his pain in a way that could be maintained at home, we found out that due to archaic rules and insurance policies, they couldn't send his biopsy off for the next gen testing they needed to do in order to determine the type of cancer he had until 2 weeks after he would be discharged from the hospital. That meant that it had now already been about a month since his diagnosis, 2 weeks in the hospital, maybe a week or 2 more in the hospital. He wasn't ready to go home. Then another 2 weeks after that, before it could even be sent to a lab that would then take another week or 2 to get back to us. I pushed for this testing. I went through every avenue that I could think of to try to get the biopsy sample sent off. Once they knew the origin of the cancer, they were able to start treating him. So he was finally released from the hospital after 34 days, a little over a year ago. He's still doing cancer treatments every 3 weeks. In fact, he had one today. And he's slowly getting back to his old self. Even though his stage 4 cancer can't ever be completely reversed or cured, he can have a good life for as long as they keep the cancer at bay. During the time he was in the hospital, I started a Caring Bridge page, be able to give updates to all of our friends and family at once. So I wouldn't have to answer the same questions over and over. There are now more than 150 people who tune into the Caring Bridge page. And I update them every couple weeks. And I was able to ask these people on the Caring Bridge page, especially last summer, for help when I needed it. I asked them if they could come to the hospital early to take notes when doctors did rounds, so I could get things done at home or elsewhere, or maybe even get a little sleep. I asked them to help move furniture to our first floor, to make a first floor bedroom for my husband when he was about to come home from the hospital. I asked them to visit at night so that I could leave a little early some days, and then he wouldn't be so lonely at night. And I called these people my angels because I really felt that that's who they were. So lesson 3, I found through that process, is find a way to get the help you know your loved one needs. If this hospital or this doctor are not doing the job that you think is necessary, get them moved to another hospital, get a second opinion. And lesson 4, don't go through it all alone. Build a village and have them help you document everything. My practical advocacy tips: 1 is to be present. Try to have someone sit in on doctor rounds, keep notes, and ask questions. When a new doctor or nurse meets the patient, be sure to go through a quick history and include all important details. They may not have the time to research this particular case fully, so just give them a quick abridged version. 2, keep records, track their medications. There were times in all 3 of those cases where I knew better than the nurses at the hospital that they were about to give the wrong medication, or that they needed to give a medication that they hadn't. So it's a lot, but pay attention. Record vitals, check test results. And 3, ask the next question. What else? Who else? Where else? 4, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, speak up. And 5, build your support network. It's never too early to build that support network. We all need people who love us, and for us to love back, especially when going through another loved one's illness. Use Caring Bridge, group texts, ask for volunteers. You don't have to be everywhere all at once, and you can't be. So in closing and for inspiration, I have noticed that my mom's generation tends to sit back and take the doctor's word as gospel on everything. They believe that this is the medical expert, so they should defer to them on all health issues. These people have gone through medical school. They do have the experience, but they may not have had experience with this specific health issue. They're human and may need your help in finding the exact best action for your loved one. Being a health advocate isn't about having medical expertise. It's about love, persistence, and the courage to speak up. It's how we transform impossible to I'm possible. Not just for your loved ones, but for ourselves as we discover just how strong we are. If you remember one thing from today, let it be this: never be afraid to speak up for someone you love. Your voice could be the one that saves their life.
Wow, Michele, you have been through so much. It's incredible to hear your story. And now I really understand why you have this passion to help and support nonprofits with the work that you do. So let's talk about the nonprofit world.
Okay.
What are the most common mistakes that people make when launching a nonprofit, and how can they avoid them?
One of the biggest mistakes is that the founder believes that this is their business that they are launching. And what they don't understand is that the board, they choose the board, the initial board, but the board runs the organization and they only have one vote on that board. So it's not, it can't be your baby. It is when you start it, but as it becomes an organization, it's no longer just your baby. So you need to choose wisely and make people believe in your mission. And also, people believe that they can just start up a nonprofit and there are just grants waiting to be given. That's unfortunately not the case. And many grantors want to see a track record. They want to see that you've been doing the things that you say you do for a couple of years before they want to invest money in your organization. So those are two of the biggest mistakes that I see.
Very big learnings. Now, your first book, So You Want to Start a Nonprofit, Now What? Combines your experience with insights with 60 experts. What was the most surprising or consistent advice that emerged from those interviews?
They almost all talked about being ethical and transparent, which was very good to hear because, you know, you see examples all the time of people trying to scam the system and not do the right thing. So it was very heartwarming to know that these people who are running nonprofits and doing the daily work are actually doing the right things.
That was good. That's amazing. Now, how do you wish more people would understand about nonprofit governance before joining a board?
There are many policies and procedures that should be put in place by the board and be overseen by the board. When your nonprofit starts out, most likely it's going to be all volunteers. So it's a little hard to keep everyone rowing in the same direction because life interferes. You know, they have paying jobs and families and other obligations. So you need to pay attention as a board member to the finances, know where the money is going, know where it's hopefully coming from, and put in place checks and balances to be sure that the donations you receive are being used in the best way possible.
Yeah, that's really important. So let's talk about your second book this time, Nonprofit Setup Simplified. It focuses solely on getting started. Why was it important to create a separate, streamlined resource just for the setup phase?
I originally planned on creating a course, a video course.
Mm-hmm.
And I had written and actually videotaped all of those 6 modules of courses. And then I realized that people starting a new nonprofit aren't looking for a course. Right. They may look for a book, but they may not look for a course. So I pivoted and I took all of those scripts, those video scripts, and turned it into a book. And I have set up a few nonprofits myself, and I learned that there are lots of backtracking and pitfalls that you can fall into where you think you can just go to the IRS and say, I want to set up a nonprofit, but there are 20 other steps that you need to do before that. So I thought I would help save other people time and headaches by just showing them how to get it set up quickly.
Wow, that is just amazing. It makes it more simple and easy for people to be able to follow and get started. Now, many people want to do good in the world, but aren't sure if starting a nonprofit is the right route. What questions should they ask themselves before jumping in?
That's a great question. Most people, I think, should not start a new nonprofit. And my first book, that's the reason I wrote it, because I was trying to talk people out of it. It's hard. It's a hard route to follow. You could instead think, because you have to incorporate and file with the IRS and file the taxes every year and follow the IRS rules in order to not lose your tax exempt status. Yes. So you could instead just run a program that you're passionate about under the umbrella of another an existing nonprofit. Wow. You could donate to, do a fundraiser, have a beef and beer with your friends or something, and donate the money to a cause that you feel passionate about. You could start a for-profit business and be like something like Bombas Socks, where for every pair people buy, they're donating to someone in need. Yeah. And you could fulfill your mission that way.
Yeah, I think people think that the nonprofit route is the biggest shortcut, but it really isn't, right?
It's not.
Yeah.
Difficult. And it's even harder to shut a nonprofit down, because I had to do that for someone, and it was like, do you have whack-a-mole in Australia?
Yes.
Whack-a-mole. Yes, because we would think it's all shut down, and then a PayPal account would pop up months later that we forgot about, and it was on and on.
My last question for you is, if someone listening today is sitting in a dream of starting a nonprofit, what's your best advice for turning that dream into a well-governed and long-lasting organization? It's all about longevity, right?
Yes. So put your initial board in place with not just yes men. You want people passionate about the mission, but who are going to challenge the status quo a little bit and are going to challenge you as the founder if they think that it's for the best interest of the organization. And put those checks and balances in place, and make sure you know that you have some funding sources to start.
Right. Yeah. You need a starting point.
Oh, and this is really important. Before you even start it, do some research and see what else is out there, because you may be stepping on the toes of organizations that have been doing this in your area for years, and you just didn't maybe know about them. So maybe join forces with someone who was already doing it.
Yes. And you're not reinventing the wheel.
Right.
You're working with support. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming online and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with our community today. Absolutely wonderful to have you being part of our tribe.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Her Story Circle is not just a speaking platform. We're a social impact movement that brings you the stories and voices of women from all over the world. We share these stories to uplift you, to empower you, to energize you, but most importantly, to help take you from where you are now to where you are trying to go. So tune in later for more speakers. We're going to take a small commercial break for 15 minutes while we wait for our next speaker. But Michele, thank you so much for being here with us today. Bye for now, everybody.